And along with co-director Judy Ireland, we want to welcome you to our monthly poetry reading series. Since 2014, Performance Poets of the Palm Beaches has been hosting poetry readings in Palm Beach County with featured poets followed by an open mic. And now, because of Zoom, we are able to expand our audience reach and to invite poets from other regions. However, South Florida has a very robust poetry scene, and we have been and continue to be committed to providing a performance showcase for our talented local poets. Are there any poetry announcements, anybody's publications or running a workshop or anything?
I have one.
Yes.
My 12th poetry book, Street Poems, is now available on Amazon in paperback and ebook.
Thank you, Birdman.
Yes.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Anybody else?
Michael and Judy have a reading in Miami coming up.
Who would like
Yes, we
to
do.
tell us about that, Judy or Michael?
Go ahead, Michael.
Judy and I will be performing with a jazz group in Nicole Tallman's Lunchtime series. It's August 3rd. So, you know, we'll be like scat singing and all that.
Always my favorite. Oh my goodness. Okay then. So
Susanna,
yes.
we have one other also. On Tuesday, the 25th at 7 p.m., we have a reading for SoFlo Pojo that will include Maggie Queenie and David Groff. So anybody who would like to join that, I'll be happy to send you the registration link.
Thank you, Judy. Anything else? All right. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the next 3 months. August 20th, Adrian Lyme. Wave to us, Adrian. Adrian Lyme and Claudia Stanek will be reading for us, will be our featured readers. September 24th is going to be a fall equinox reading. And it's going to be, the entire reading is going to be an open mic. And so we would like to ask for the topic to be celebration of harvest in whatever way you see fit to address that. So that's the 24th of September, fall equinox reading. We'd love to see everybody there with a poem or two. And then in October, the 22nd, Mary Block of Swim and Oscar Fuentes, who is a Miami-based poet, I believe. He will be here with Mary as our featured poets in October. So that's the lineup for the next 3 months. And just as a note, when we start our open mic, Judy, Regina, and I will be reading from our, actually through November of this year, we'll be, just before the open mic, we're going to honor our well-loved and respected friend and fellow poet, Dr. Mary Galvin. At the beginning of the open mic, Judy, Regina, and I will read from Mary's astonishing and prolific work, The Secret Life of Love. So you'll hear some of Mary's poems. For those of you who may not know, Mary was on hospice at home. She was comfortable and well cared for by her devoted wife, Laura, and the hospice team. So that's coming up just before our open mic. So as we move forward, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Jacobson. Elizabeth Jacobson was the 5th Poet Laureate of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and an Academy of American Poets 2020 Laureate Fellow. Her most recent book, Not Into the Blossoms and Not Into the Air, won the New Measure Poetry Prize, selected by Marianne Baruch, Free Verse Editions, Parlor Press 2019. And the 2019 New Mexico-Arizona Book Award for both New Mexico Poetry and Best New Mexico Book. Her other books include Her Knees Pulled In, Tres Chiques Books 2012, 2 chapbooks from Dancing Girl Press, Are the Children Make Believe, and A Brownstone. And Everything Feels Recent When You're Far Away, Poetry and Art from Santa Fe Youth During the Pandemic 2021, which she co-edited. Her poems have been published in many publications, including the American Poetry Review, Plowshares, the Los Angeles Review, Swim, and her community projects have received 8 consecutive grants from the Wider Biner Foundation for Poetry. Elizabeth is the reviews editor for the online literary journal terrain.org, and she teaches poetry workshops regularly in Santa Fe, often in partnership with the Center for Contemporary Arts and the Public Library. And with that, I give you Elizabeth Jacobson. Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judy and Susanna, for inviting us. And I am so happy to read with Anne Marie. I don't think we've ever read together before. We've certainly been at each other's readings a lot, and it's always a pleasure to hear Anne Marie's work. So I'm going to read one poem that is, it's the L word, a long poem, which I love writing, and I love reading long poems. And this poem is included in my new manuscript. It's the second section, and it's a narrative sequence, and it's a prose poem. And essentially, I don't think you need to know too much about it. I think it's pretty easy to follow the narrative. The one thing I will say is that it's about a family on the East Coast in the 1960s, and a baby was born into the family who was very sick, and there already was a brother and a sister who were, at the time of the baby's birth, the sister was 5 and the brother was 3.5. And it's called A Brown Stone. 1. Igloo. I knew she was dying without knowing what dying was. My head peeking around the door frame, holding onto the sleeve of my 4-year-old brother. White translucent face, white cotton terry one piece with feet. The baby's droopy body in the arms of the soft-spoken, rosy-cheeked nurse. Beehive hair pressed with an iron, white pants and shirt, white ruffled collar pressed with an iron. Always milk dripping from the corner of her curved, faintly smiling mouth, as if it were melted snow still holding its white color. Always the same crooked smile, always the same corner with the milk, always the head not lifting, hanging off to the side like a sock doll. There was a continuous whir from the family surrounding our house. A lawnmower motor, basketball thuds, kids squealing under a sprinkler or a handheld hose, wet cut green grass smell of warm autumn, each family with its own car noises, revvings and screechings, a sister who couldn't swallow, neighbors calling to each other out of open windows to ones already in cars, cars packed with kids, kids sitting on the laps of other kids, front and back, 8 kids in a white Opel going 1 mile to school, one mother driving, still in her nightgown, car coat not buttoned, maybe a breast would be flapping, showing a kind of white. I never heard anyone say, we don't know what will happen. I never heard anyone say, it's all right to be still. All the mothers were young, but they looked old to us. Pointed fingernails polished red in the spring, red in the winter. Tight pants and flowered shifts and cigarettes with lipstick marks. Hair that curled up at the ends in one big continuous upside down wave. I stole my brother's coins, tricked him by trading the bigger nickel for the smaller dime. 5 pennies for only 1 quarter. He was happy to end up with more. Everything else was so thin, like the constant stream of formula milk from the baby's mouth. Her small, pretty face never changed expression, never cried. A snow baby with black pebble eyes, held up by the rosy-faced nurse who slept in her room. We sat on the edge of the twin bed, and she would put her in our arms, first my brother and then me. We didn't know the word trust, didn't know there was anything else. The nurse held the back of the baby's head up, tried to get the milk to stay in. Her long fingers were velvety, slightly blue underneath. I would touch them while I stroked the baby's silk hair. That winter, there was so much snow, we built an igloo in the front yard, just like the igloo in the polar bear book, with a square entrance we could crawl into. So much heavy snow came down, we could hardly see each other's faces if we were outside the igloo. Sheets and sheets of it hung in the chill. Inside the igloo, we made a wooden matchstick fire, sucked the melted water out of our mittens, sculpted furniture to sit on, ice benches and an ice bed and an ice nightstand. We brought in small branches from the pine outside and pressed them to the wall for decoration. We went into the big house for supplies, white bread, yellow cheese, purple jelly, mugs and plates. The Candyland game, more and more snow came down like heavy cream. Neighborhood cars in their driveways like igloos, piles of snow on the street like igloos. There was ghostly white daylight, and then there wasn't. Street lamps came on. We jabbed a hole in the roof for the smoke to escape. Shadows, a beam, the silence, and the hum. 2 moons side by side, sucking the melted water out of our mittens. They never called us in, even after it was dark. This was the baby's only winter. We brought her a cup of fresh snow, made a miniature snowball and placed it in her mouth that couldn't hold anything. On her dresser was a silver brush and comb set, a frosted porcelain candy cottage nightlight, a set of 16 clay trolls with pink faces and stocking caps, tumbling and rolling and holding a ball, things the baby would never do. This was a time when people didn't understand the feelings of animals, didn't think animals had feelings, maybe also the feelings of babies, especially babies who couldn't eat, babies who were shriveled instead of growing. How could a creature have feelings if it couldn't think? Without a thought, insects were crushed, smushed, slugs covered in salt turned to green slime. A cat run over by a car at the end of another street remained there for days while the neighborhood kids poked it with a stick, tried to see what was inside. The red blood turned blue, then brown, then black. The matted fur stuck to the curb like tar. All the mothers and fathers seemed to know what would happen, kept it a secret from the kids. I never heard anyone say, "I don't know, what do you think?" When I woke up in the morning, if I listened carefully, a small voice told me what to do. Get dressed, go downstairs, eat cereal from a colorful box, kiss the baby on her head, pile into the car with the other kids, and pay attention to the teacher. Brown bagged lunches with crushed sandwiches, yellow and black cans of Mott's apple juice, red leather seats smooth like the palm of a dry hand, flat pouches on the inside of the car filled with toys and bright hard candies. The small voice said I should ask before I keep one. The small voice told me not to put one in my pocket. Even ordinary days were neon, glowing. I never saw anyone not want more and more of anything that might float up. This is the second section, and it's called Shame. I hope this is okay. I've never done this before, but I figured since I have 20 minutes, I would try it. Okay, 2, shame. Every girl has her troubles. Some are born misshapen. I was born with a tiny beating heart on the inside of my thigh. My mother had to take me to the doctor. I heard teratoma. I heard venous. I heard inoperable. The doctor told my mother it would never go away on its own. Every night, my mother applied a yellow cream from a metal tube with the end of a Q-tip. The dense skin burned and sizzled slightly, dissolving the extra heart week by week into a gluey dough. Other doctors wanted to look at the girl with the outside heart, wanted to see it dissolving, wanted to jab it with a silver pick. On days like these, there was a bottle of chocolate milk in the leaden milk box by the kitchen door. One tall glass bottle filled with creamy brown liquid among 3 or 4 white ones. The milkman wore a white suit, a white cap with a black visor. He carried the milk from his truck on the street to the house in a metal basket. There were no doors on his truck, and he hopped in and out so quickly it seemed as if the truck never stopped moving. My mother was uncomfortable while she was pregnant with the baby. She always wore an orange tent dress with a dark green collar. My mother didn't like to touch my heart. Sometimes it would burn and bleed. Sometimes it would leak oily pus, and I couldn't do anything about it. The small voice told me not to put the cream in my mouth. The small voice told me not to put the cream on my younger brother. I was in nursery school when she was pregnant, and sometimes they made me take a van back and forth. The van driver drove fast. He had long, dirty fingernails that curled into the steering wheel. At first, a warm stream of blood seeped out onto the stoop where I sat waiting for the van to take me home. It burned and frightened me, and then more leaked from the outside heart, more than had ever come out before, until my corduroy pants were so stiff I could hardly step into the van. The smell was strong. The van driver knew. The other kids knew. I was terrified to move, terrified to get out of the van. Some of the blood rolled down my pant leg onto the slate path as I walked to the house. When my mother bent to open the front door, the pocket of her orange dress caught in the handle. The pocket was trimmed in green. The pocket tore open. I heard, "What is going on?" I heard, "How did this happen?" My mother spanked my bottom, which was cold and sodden, like a drowned creature gone limp. Frost covered the front lawn and crunched underfoot. It was a cold spring. In the morning, I was sick to my stomach. I was shivering so violently, my teeth clacked together. They told me that I had to go to school. They told me that I would have to go in the van from now on, both ways, back and forth, in the van. My dread was so grave, I could hardly step into the van. The driver didn't say hello. The other kids moved away from me. At school, I played with wooden blocks by myself in a corner. The bathroom was full of paint supplies, easels, rags, jars of dried tempera paint. I went in every few minutes to check if there was blood. I never heard, "Take a deep breath and let the morning fill your lungs." I never heard, "For you, the dogwood tree is blooming." This is the third section. It's called Cement. When the baby was born, she didn't make a sound. Not then, not ever. The baby was pretty, but dumb. The baby couldn't swallow. This is what I heard them say into the powder blue princess phone that hung on the wall in the kitchen. The baby always has to have someone with her. The baby has beautiful dark hair and a lot of it. My brother and I stood by the side of our mother's bed and held her hand. She slept on and on while our father was at work. At kindergarten, we made a big circle. I put my right foot in, took my right foot out, put my left foot in, and shook it all about. There were circles all the time on the chalkboard filled with groups of words. A words like apple and ant and arm. B words like boy and bat and ball. There were circles on the floor for sitting cross-legged and playing hand-slapping games, knee-slapping games. Our teacher played circles and circles of songs for us. While we were singing, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," I looked around the circle and I saw Ronald Tedder's penis showing in his baggy shorts. That week, his mother called to invite me to his birthday party. She told my mother that I would be the only girl there. Every day, Ronald Tedder's penis found its way out of his pants like a worm crawling from the center of an apple after it had been cut in half. The small voice said, "Look at his penis." The small voice said, "Don't look at his penis." I could look or not look at him, and still I saw a penis, raw and pale and bald like a newborn mouse. One black eye swollen shut in the jelly-like pink skin. My mother said I didn't have to go to the party. She got out of bed and walked into the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. I could hear the water running while she was coughing, trying to get something up from her throat. The air got clear and chilly. The smell changed from green to smolder. Red and yellow leaves began to fall off the trees and turn orange, then brown. The older kids on the block raked them into piles, and we huddled into mounds as they heaped more and more on top of us, holding still under the dusty piles, playing dead. I asked my parents if they would play the Beatles for us, but they didn't answer. I loved, love, love me do, you know I love you. I started to pick little holes in my brother's clothes with my teeth. Sometimes while we lay next to each other on the den floor watching TV. Other times I would go into his room and bite something that was hanging in his closet. We had eggs almost every night for dinner with fried bologna. My mother scrambled them in a black skillet while my brother and I watched from the white Formica table. We had a big square electric aluminum omelet cooker, and sometimes she would use this. She cut fluffy cubes and put them on our plates with a spoonful of runny grape jelly. The kindergarten teacher had a meeting with my mother. They sat on little red chairs at one of the little round tables while I played on the other side of the room with the puzzles. My mother wore her orange tent dress with the dark green trim, a bulky matching green cardigan. She said her stomach still hurt from the baby, who was already 11 months old. The teacher told her that most afternoons, after school is over, after all the other kids have gone home, she finds me still waiting on the front steps for someone to pick me up. The teacher said I told her that I liked to watch the janitor sweep the sidewalk. The teacher said she saw me nibbling pieces of the cracked cement. And this is the last section, number 4. It's titled Wound. I spent hours and hours, day after day, wandering in the woods at the end of my street. Tall tree woods full of oak and maple and sycamore, trees that gave up their leaves to the permanent collage covering the damp floor of the earth. I loved the way my sneakered feet sunk down into this muddy canvas. The thick brown glue of each dissolving season was dense and cushioned, always moist, and seeped up to coat the bottom white rubber edge of my keds. A shadowy smell encased me as I roamed. I felt as if I was in a dream inside a giant acorn shell, wondering all the time about where the baby went. The baby fell asleep. The baby never woke up. The baby is in the clouds now. In the spring, soft purple heads of skunk cabbage poked up out of the gooey earth by the brook. I loved to push my fingers through the yielding part at the top, the foul smell pouring out like an infection. But now the plants had withered and their odor had flattened into the soil as its end was also its beginning. This world seemed seamless as I drifted. Young sycamores bent toward me and opened their arms. Lying down at the base of a massive oak, in front of an opening in the trunk like a small cave, a perfect diorama of a cave where something warm could get in, like a chipmunk or a squirrel, and make a home. I saw the withered roots hanging down like long, slender fingers, felt them caress my back as I tucked in. There was an animal curled up inside my tall little girl body, like an embryo in a specimen jar floating in formaldehyde, but coming alive, stirring inch by inch, a caterpillar becoming a moth, something confident and untaught. As a child in a childhood, days seeped on like strangers. They were creaturely, sensorily. They flowed back and forth, around and around, without boundaries, without shape. The small voice said, "Who took the baby away? Did sleep come and wrap her up and, and carry her off in a bundle? Or did death do this?" The small voice said, "You will be taken away. The small voice said, will you be taken away like the baby? Will your brother?" Sounds from the cul-de-sacs that made up the neighborhood bounced in and out of the woods like the echo of thunder. I licked and sucked the skin just under my lower lip. It was constantly chapped red and flaky with bloody cracks and bumps. I pulled the soft caps off green acorns, fitting them to each of my fingertips, opening and closing my hands, each finger a puppet with a hat. I split the acorns and picked out some of the bitter yellow meat, eating the rest like a squirrel with the scraping front of my teeth. I examined a plain brown stone that was even on one side and jagged on the other. The baby was there one night, and then the next morning she was gone. The rosy-faced nurse with the soft blue fingertips was gone. Her twin bed was made and covered with the black and white checked bedspread. All the baby's clothes and blankets were gone. The baby's crib had been folded flat, and it leaned against the wall in the baby's room. I picked at the skin around the sides of my nails, picked and picked until they were open and bleeding. I sucked the blood from the cuts, and the soapy taste made my stomach ache. Maybe in a dream, the baby would hear herself talking, could eat, could swallow, could float after the scent of food, swim in the air toward the voices of her family. My kindergarten teacher taught us a prayer, told us to say the prayer at night when the light was turned off. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the earth my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the earth my soul to take. I didn't know what a soul was, but I thought that it might be something that puts out feelers, like an ant. I tapped on the inside of the tree to see if anything would tap back. I tapped again. I pressed the side of my face into a pillow of damp leaves and chewed on the sweet-tasting skin around one of my nail beds. Maybe the baby followed a dream into death, or death into a dream. The small voice said, "Pick up the brown stone." The small voice said, "It is the story of who you are." Thank you all so much for listening.
Wow, Elizabeth, thank you. Thanks for reading that to us. I know we all appreciate it. And the chat's going to be open or is open. So if you would like to put your comments to Elizabeth in there, now's the time to do that. And I will go ahead and introduce Anne Marie. Anne Marie Macari is the author of 5 books of poems, including Heaven Beneath and Red Deer. Her first book, Ivory Cradle, won the APR Honickman First Book Prize in 2000, chosen by Robert Creeley. Her poems and essays have been widely published. She founded and directed the Drew University MFA program in poetry. And with that, I give you Anne Marie. Anne Marie.
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Judy. And thank you, Elizabeth, for that poem that is really stunning and incredible to listen to. I've read it, but listening to it was really beautiful. I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to read a few older poems and then some of my new ones. And I'm going to start with a book called She Heads into the Wilderness, my 3rd book. And I have a sonnet sequence in there, and I'm just going to read 3 of them, I think. And it's sort of sonnets to the patriarchy, against the patriarchy. They're not political so much, but that's what's underlying them, and a reimagining of Eve's story. And we'll start with this one. We traveled as seeds and dust travel, by wind or bird, spread to all corners. We were desire exhausting itself, a membrane shuddering. Was it accident brought us together? I remember you as I first saw you, bent over, studying something, just your back and the top of your head. I still see your shoulders hunch and hunger, your body like some great plant struggling from earth. And how to speak. Wasn't there a strange language, something deep from the dirt of our throats? Each day we try to wake up, but it's late now in the common story. We come from pollen tongue, spider weed, from the blue rib of sea, dropped here, dreaming. This is sort of a paradise poem. I was in Florence with my dear friend, the poet Jean Valentine, and it was my birthday. And she bought me a little container of wild strawberries, and they were the most extraordinary things I'd ever tasted. And we were writing a lot. The words were ambrosia, a bowl of wild strawberries. You said you knew where some grew and had picked them right in New York City, the size of red tears, bowels of paradise, here in a bowl on the balcony. You said you knew where some grew and they were hidden and wild at the same time in the city. Said you couldn't describe the taste, more like fragrance melting on the tongue, filling your head. You knew where they still grew, hidden, though we had a bowl of them then and there on a balcony overlooking the garden. Wild strawberries, small pearls of forgetfulness in another country above a garden. In the beginning was the animal of space licking earth to life. The night sky lit with great herds of stars and the paths of planets glowing radiant, rubbing each other. Heavens thrust and caress upon us, green and fertile in the cracks, poultice of dust, spore, pollen, and ash. Creation's luminous mouth. In the beginning, all that was made was good because it was made. And what was made and not made knew each other, and it was good. The stars in unending intercourse, heaven an amniosac, the slopping, salty center. From there, all the swimmers breaststroking, diving, all night long toward earth. Okay, and I'm going to read from just two poems from Red Deer, which is a book that a lot of the poems come out of extraordinary experiences I had seeing Ice Age painted caves in France and Spain. One of the great journeys, privileges of my life to be in places where our ancestors had made art 10 to 40,000 years ago. And I want to read this one poem called The Horse Wall, which is about a sculpted frieze in France. And early in the 20th century, when they didn't know how to look for these things, they were using a pickaxe. Look, I don't know what they were looking for with a pickaxe, but what they finally realized before they had completely destroyed it was there was a sculpted frieze. This is high up on Cap Blanc, and it's horses, these gorgeous horses. And at first you can't see it because of all the damage from when they discovered it. But when you finally see these horses, it's so stunning. I remember my knees sort of wanting to give out. And there's one particular horse. It's just gorgeous. Anyway. And they would have been able to see, they probably would have been painted and they would have been visible from miles away. They think they're about 15,000 years old. The horse wall, and this is in the voice of the sculptor, who may very well have been a woman, because there was a burial in front of the wall and the skeleton was a woman. I ate stone, entered it, my hand reaching to nudge the horse through the wall, stroke it out, carving horse eye and velvet ear, massaging up and down muscled legs. So many springs now of cracking ice, thaw taking me down, 1,000 walls between us, and I can't rub through. I fall apart and can't speak past the carbon in my mouth, the pebbles. Are you still following the herd? Was it real? How I ate stone and walked through a galaxy, shining in the flecks, found space no one else could see, found you waiting there. You who opened my stone body, who softened my sadness. Now, I never want to be touched, never again be touched. All the groping hands and pickaxes, all the stars of distance dancing madly. My bludgeoned animal. There was a place tender in rock where first you showed yourself. There, your soul eye that nothing can remove, black space in the wall of the world. The extinction of my kind. When the carcass of the mind takes off its bloody coat and wanders toward its life again, I come back from my ancient sleep. I come back on all fours and stand and drag my claws down rock and mud, leaving signs for you. I come back. Lumbering into the cold, light blinded, I come back. The earth is shining, but the place without light pulses inside me. I come back to you. Dear friend, I slept so long I went into my animal body. I longed for you there. Okay, my latest book came out during the pandemic, sadly, called Heaven Beneath. And I'll read a few from that. So one of my sons, I see there's a bird man here. I don't know how literal that name is, but one of my sons is an ornithologist, and he worked for a time at the Museum of Natural History in New York. And I'd take kids, if I had kids visiting, or just take myself, and he would give us, I called them backstage tours, where we would see, you know, the preserved birds. They have something like 1 million specimens of birds. And they also have a spot where they have boxes of bird bones. And I took my partner's granddaughter to see, for him to show us around, and he took out this tiny little box, and it had hummingbird bones in it. They were so tiny, they looked like hairs. Hummingbird bones in a small box, in a museum cabinet, legs fine as white hair. I think of all the beings pinned to boards. I think of bird ghosts swooping around this basement, and bones chewed clean by flesh-eating beetles. The child makes a nest of her palm. Anybody can be a nest, any corner, cliff, any music flying from the radio. I want to say I'll come back in a state of torpor. I'll try to speak, but won't be able to move my mouth to tell you how perfect the bones and the hand that holds them. The eye hole full of memories of flight, of ecstasy, and flowers' throats, wings beating so fast they disappear, its brain a sapphire tunnel. There's a room of metal cabinets. There's a hand holding bones. All around us, a shuddering. There's a nest for the body, made of cardboard and light. I'm sure many of you out there, as I have done many, many times, have sat at a hospital bed. And this poem is about that. Bow down to the hospital bed, to the sleeper, his mouth open wide. Bow to breath uneven, to the deaf man on the curtain's other side. Bow to a fear of tight blankets, pills, needles, blood, buzzing ceiling, metallic glare. Here, in this processing center, clear fluids in plastic tubes. Bow down to limbo's white light, quiet feet down the hall, passing through. The room. Tonight, snow intermittent, flakes flat as ash or anything broken and raining down, volcanic, atomic. I move through midnight, then 2 a.m., books stacked, my glass of water. Behind clouds, a white blur, the ghost ship half sunk or half risen, riding quiet to the other side. Awake within my walls, I'm as alone as I long to be, in the complete, in the nothing that carries me, drifts me. Book, drown me. Water, dream me. Table, knock me. Lamp, flame me. I'm yours now. Lost witness, forgotten blessing. I am going to read a few new poems. And these are kind of raw. So I had a brother who died almost 40 years ago now, and he died from a gun. And it was a gun accident, although I really don't, I don't like calling it that, even though technically that's really what it was. He didn't commit suicide. But if you're dumb enough to play with a gun, I don't know how it's an accident. So, okay. This first poem is in my brother's voice. My brother tells me of the slamming door. That first Christmas of my death, I thought maybe you, of all people, might hear me. I stayed near, hoping I could tell you it was an accident, a stupid joke. I longed to make amends, to explain how there's no magic in death, only how fast it came. Then the saturation of grief soaking me, the living trying to haul me back to mother, to father, to mother, father. Not meant hurting them, not meant dying. The earth summoning me, busy streets of the old neighborhood, yards full of plastic and metal, and beyond that, webs of trees like intermediaries lifting and bowing, humming, moaning, me wanting, I don't know what, not my body, not that, but something. Sister, I never saw the door opening before it slammed shut behind me. I only felt a sharp breeze, a gasp escaping flesh, a smell of sorrow. Not then could speak I or cry out. And with no understanding, I crossed over. What are we doing? Okay. All right, so I am going to read this one. It's called Amerigun, and I'm not going to read any others, but I'm working on some poems that have this figure, Amerigun, in them. And I'm not sure how I feel about them yet, but this was the first of the poems that came to me and that got me started in this kind of conversation that I've been having with my brother now for the last year. Amerigun. What is it now? Almost 40 years. Don't think I've always missed you. Sometimes I've forgotten you and your Ameriguns, the ones Dad found in your apartment after you died and dumped in Powell's Cove. Why? When you told me you'd learned your lesson. But there are no lessons for Ameriguns, only more Ameriguns. They reproduce like rabbits, LOL. Ameriguns, we give them to toddlers. We love the troubled boys to have them for Christmas. Ameriguns under the tree, all wrapped and waiting to be loved. And you, accident, carry your Amerigun into the next life. You use it like an oar to ferry you over. Use it like a metal straw to drink your milk. It's a telescope when you hold it to your eye. Amerigun with the extra chamber you forgot about. Didn't empty as you emptied the others, as you joked about shooting yourself, as you shot yourself in front of your friends, your lover, Amerigun, whispering in your ear, hey baby, just try me out. I'm so hot. Amerigun, edging your scalp. That's Amerigun for you. Good night. Okay, I'll get a little easier. The train speeds. The train speeds above the East River, lights from bridges, cars, apartments, an onslaught of red, green, and gold, such stars of the heavenly earth exploding through sooty windows. Once, on Dad's boat, we all jumped off and swam to the beach, then back against the current, and I saw you tiring, frightened, and swam with you till Dad hauled us back on board by our wrists, cold and dripping. It's that moment of panic and weakness that finds me sometimes, and then the lights go out and no buoyancy, the train slipping underground again in Manhattan. These days, I accompany the dying as if I'm not traveling the same distance, as if I could hold myself apart as I do now from you. No longer waiting for you to catch your breath. Treading, 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 dear brother. Okay. Thank you. All right, this is the last one I'm going to read of these, and it's called A List for My Brother on the Other Side. My coffee cup picturing mammoths. 2 scurrying lizards I almost stepped on, but didn't. Last night's full moon blazing toward Venus and Jupiter. A pearl dove pacing. Today I take a different trail to find you, to listen as best I can, imagining you are like the ghost particles physicists search for that have nothing to do with matter and yet occupy most of space. I tell you that age has gifted me a happiness that could only have come to me now. My blue window morning, the dog resting her head on my foot, and you close your eyes, nodding. All right, I'm just going to end with something not on that subject. We will all go home with you. As a child picking through blackberry thickets, through underbrush and thorns, I thought we were all together, but you weren't born. I filled a pail with fruit, scratched my arms in that dense, and stopped to place the black orb on my tongue. Far into time, my mouth a place of sight, and a purple black unrolling inside. I heard the door while trees leaned overhead. We will all go home with you through brambles and weeds. That is what they said. Thank you so much.
Anne Marie, thank you for your remarkable work. And if everybody would just unmute themselves, and let's give a round of applause for Elizabeth and Anne Marie, if we
Thank you.
could.